Good afternoon and welcome to VetNet, the Veteran Network. My name is Elvis Avdic, and today's session is brought to you by Institute for Veterans and Military Families, IVMF. Today we're going to have a great panel of experts who are going to share their advice and successful business tips for entrepreneurs and business owners and veterans. So before we kick it off, I'm just going to go over some ground rules for our panelist guests. If you're not speaking, guys, make sure you mute your mics, and you can find them on top of the screen so that if there's no echoing in the sounds. I'll send the questions through the chat box. If you don't see them, I will let you know. Misty, I'll let you take over.
Thanks, Elvis. So as Elvis mentioned, this week's actually National Veteran Small Business Week, is recognized by the SBA and many others. And we are doing a lot here at the IVMF this month to really kind of celebrate what we were founded on, and that's, our entrepreneurship program. As many of you know, the IVMF has a wide variety of entrepreneurship portfolio programs that really works to meet veterans where they're at in their entrepreneurial career, and whether that's ideation or startup, or even growth now with some of our newer programs. While I won't take time to go into all of those, you can easily find them on our website, ivmf.syr.edu. I will say that I think the biggest part, and we've heard it over and over again, out of the, I think it's now 65,000 entrepreneurship grads that IVMF has, the biggest connection or thing of value that they find is really connecting to other veterans or other groups that have been there and done that before, and creating that mentoring relationship. So what we're really going to concentrate on over the next hour, and I want it to be interactive, and I want to make sure that we get plenty of questions from the audience, but really what I want to concentrate on here is taking time to ask the experts, the people that have been there, that have made sure to use those resources and tools, and that have walked the walk, be able to kind of pour back into the community and say what worked for them, what didn't work for them, what even they're still trying to figure out. And so that we can start from there. So with that, I will actually pass it over to the panelists to each introduce themselves. We do have a great mix of not only veteranpreneurs and military spouse entrepreneurs, as well as one of the entrepreneurship portfolio's largest supporter, First Data, and what they do for small business. And each of them not only have their entrepreneurship background to pull from, but also some professional background as well to pull from. So with that, I will pass it over to Liza to introduce herself, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, Misty. Hi, I'm Liza, and I am a serial entrepreneur. I've started 4 different businesses in both the software and service-based industries. I've successfully sold one of those businesses, and 2 of them are still in operation today. I am the co-founder of Mad Skills, a virtual staffing company, and we place military spouses in remote jobs with companies with distributed teams. I am an active duty Army spouse, and I'm currently located in the Richmond, Virginia area, and I am also a VWise Phoenix graduate.
Great, thank you. Ray, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Ray Ramirez. I am the head of military veteran affairs for First Data Corporation. My background is mostly through human resources and how we've interacted with veterans in the past. I myself am a Navy veteran, Gulf War veteran, and I'm coming from a background of probably about 20 some odd years of human resources interaction with veterans organizations. So.
Thank you. And John Massey.
Hey, I'm John Massey. I'm the executive director and founder, or I guess co-founder, of the Veterans Healing Farm. My wife and I created an organization called the Veterans Healing Farm back in 2013 is when it became a nonprofit. We got our 501c3 status in 2015. I went through the EBV program in 2013 in Florida State. My wife went through the Syracuse University program in 2014. And her and I, with the Veterans Healing Farm, were awarded the NatCon national competition of the EBV does a business plan competition. We won the top prize, and that money was kind of seed money that we've used to create a program in which we grow large quantities of food, take it to the VA hospital, and provide veterans coming and going about 8,700 pounds of produce, and we have 50 families that are involved with growing that food. They took home 6,000 pounds of food. All the produce is given away free of charge, and this year we incorporated cut flowers into the program. We were able to give away hundreds of bouquets.
Thank you. Justin?
Hi, I'm Justin Pless. I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm a 2010 Syracuse EBB graduate. I have my own law practice out here that I've had now for going on 8 years, doing primarily commercial real estate transactional work, and just happy to talk about anything related to entrepreneurship or EBB or whatever.
Thanks so much. And last but not least, Kevin.
Hello. Excuse me, I'm Kevin Gelsizer. I'm the Assistant Director of Veteran Services at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia. I also teach undergraduate international relations here. I'm proud to help with the EBV program. I've run several entrepreneurial programs here at St. Joseph's University. We do the EBV program through Syracuse, and we also run our own program, which is similar, called VEJ. That's open to all honorably discharged veterans or people currently serving in the military. These are great programs. I'm really honored to help. My background isn't really so much in business; it's in higher education. Finishing a PhD, I've taught college for years, so I'm really kind of passionate about bridging all the resources of the academic world, research, libraries, statistical information, and bringing that to the veteran entrepreneurs.
Thanks, Kevin. So to start out, what we're really going to do here is I'm going to just put up a few questions to kind of guide the conversation a bit. And from there, obviously, you all that are out there tuning in live, please feel free to type in the chat box if you have any questions, and Elvis will make sure that we get to those. So let's start out just a general question for the panel. So many of our veteran entrepreneurs are sitting out there wondering, and they have a great idea, but it's very easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis, to overthink the idea, to not know where to go in terms of first steps of resources or anything else, and kind of get scared into starting because they're thinking they're almost getting stuck in the minutia, the everyday details. What would you really say to a veteran that has a good idea, is ready to start, but is kind of holding back from taking that first step due to whatever, issues or excuses there might be? What would you say to kind of encourage a veteran out there to take that first step into entrepreneurship?
I'll go ahead and chime in real quick. One of the things that I usually advise people on is to get familiar with the lean startup type model, to where you're trying to develop what they call an MVP, which is your minimal viable product. So sometimes this can just be an email you send out to a group of friends to see if it's, if your idea sticks or if it's good. Like taking those little steps of action are going to help you get to where you need to go. So if you're in analysis paralysis, like you've made this big, large business plan and you're not really sure where to start, like start with validating your idea, seeing what that MVP might be in your domain, because it's different across all the different industries. If it's a tech product, well, then see if you can do whatever you're trying to do tech-wise, see if you can do it physically first, and see if you, meet a need and you see some traction there, and just build on that each step of the way.
Thanks, Liza.
I can jump in. My situation is probably a little different because I have a service, business as opposed to like selling like a product. And I feel like from people I've talked to that it's a little bit easier to do that type of thing, especially in the startup phase, because the startup costs are less. You don't have to, physically produce anything. If you have a computer and a small office space, you can kind of do what you need to do. But I would just say if you're kind of on the fence and you have an idea and it looks viable, at some point you just have to go for it. And and see and just try it. Otherwise, you'll never know. It might be stressful in the beginning, but it'll either work or it won't work, and then you'll know.
And if it's not working, it's always time to innovate from there, pivot and see what you need to do next. Is there anyone else that wants to jump in?
Yeah, I would say that if at all possible, that's when it's really key to have a mentor. There are a lot of organizations out there like SCORE who have retired business executives. There's a lot of colleges with business schools. And don't be afraid to mention you're a veteran. I would go and start with that and say, I'm a veteran, I need help, I just need to talk to someone to see if I'm ready. And almost universally, people will drop what they're doing to help you. So it's really getting that outside perspective is probably key to see if you're actually ready to go up and running.
Yeah, and I'd go in on that as well. I mean, everything that was said so far is sound advice. One thing that I would say is, I think my experience with a lot of veterans is that they often don't lack analysis paralysis. They're almost too gung-ho at times. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but there is a sense of, you know, in terms of the mentorship, the EBV has been very helpful for me. The SCORE mentors, all those people we've tapped into. And one of the biggest things I got from our mentors, actually one in particular told me, you earn the right to do things. You don't just go out and do them because they would make your business better or you want to do them. You essentially set a goal and you earn the right to do that. And I think oftentimes there's a tendency to think that money is going to solve it. And so if you leverage your assets, if you mortgage your home, if you just go out and rush into it and you put enough money behind it, it's going to give you a better chance. Whereas I think it's the reverse. I think sometimes, you know, the patience and to wait for it oftentimes allows you to really flesh it out, and money can at times hide inefficiencies. And so the idea of really making it lean and efficient before you really put yourself in a vulnerable position financially, I think that's a really important thing to consider.
Thanks. So let's talk about some of these resources that we mentioned. I heard kind of off the top of the hand, people have used SCORE, EBV, of course, other programming. You might go to 1 Million Comps or Parking Labs. Recently, the IVMF actually went out and cataloged over 25,000 physical resources that a veteran entrepreneur can walk into and get help with their business, anywhere from networking to SCORE to SPVCs to VBOX, which frankly, even after cataloging all of that, it's still a bit overwhelming. What resources, when you were first starting out, did you really connect to? How did you go about finding them? And where did you kind of find value in those resources in order to push your company forward?
I can go on that. I would put in a plug, I think, here for the EBV national conventions. I've been to 3 of them out of, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. And I thought they were a big help to me in terms of the content that they offered and just getting to interface with a lot of other people who are doing entrepreneurial stuff and get ideas from them, more so even than the EBV program itself, because a lot of the people at the conferences were further along and had different experiences or were, you know, at different stages in their business.
I think that that's a huge point there, actually, to look at too. We are hosting another EBV NatCon February in Austin, Texas. So I think that, you know, a big thing to look into is like-minded folks. So and not just other veteranpreneurs all the time. So there's, you know, a lot of great networking opportunities that one can kind of tap into, whether it's 1 Million Cups, which is in, I think, around 100 cities now. Bunker also has networking, Bunker Brews, but in that you can find someone that's within your industry or in your life track, or actually might have complementary skills to what you need as well to make sure that they can connect. Ray, I'm going to turn this over to you. So often, you know, we have a lot of veteranpreneurs here who have sort of, you know, walked the line of veteranpreneurship, but now there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that have actually made the pledge to say, We want to do more business with veterans, and we also want to figure out how to encourage veteran-owned small businesses on main streets across the United States. Can you speak to a little bit about First Data and what you all have been doing to kind of encourage veteran entrepreneurship, and how groups out there that might be listening might be able to get plugged in?
Sure. First Data, we're committed to our veterans and our veteran service members and their spouses as well. I think that what we do here is, we offer our veterans the opportunity to, one, since we're part of the CVOB, the Coalition of Veteran-Owned Businesses, and COE, we steer them in that direction for resources, and so they can partner with this organization to help them out. Also, as a company ourselves, we do offer veterans an opportunity to have our product at a discounted rate and/or a free handheld product. We want to give them a boost up and help them, with our POS system and get them on the road. So there's a couple of small things that we do outside of our focused hiring. So.
Thanks so much. Liza and John, I think there might be somebody needs to be. Okay, Liza and John, you both have kind of had non-traditional funding routes. I know that both of you all have competed in and placed in some of our business plan competitions and actually used that money as capital. When it comes to that non-traditional funding, there's actually great ways that can help entrepreneurs move forward. We have one graduate who I think has actually earned about $85,000 now to move their business forward. Aside from the obvious things like capital, what are some of the great things that you get from kind of getting involved in those non-traditional opportunities, whether it's mentoring or coaching, et cetera?
I think for us at Mad Skills, besides just getting the actual prize money, which is extremely helpful because we have specific goals for that money in order to help grow the business, is also just the network that comes with getting that. So the recognition, the publicity we got from that also brought in new clients and more job placements for us. So just plugging us even deeper into the community, I think it's great. And there are all kinds of opportunities for those small types of things and different ways to fund your business. And that was one avenue that has helped us out a lot. But we've also done a lot of bootstrapping ourselves and generating income for our business to help grow the business instead of trying to go spend a lot of time raising capital. We've actually just been creating it ourselves to put it back into the business. So there's many different ways to do it. And I don't think it's necessarily a one size fits all. You just have to kind of look at the type of business you're starting and what you're wanting to do and what your goals are, and then go out, and find those different competitions that you could pitch at, or the different grant opportunities, or the different income generating opportunities, and weigh those and see what your best option is to go after it. And then just the mentorship and the network is an amazing benefit of those.
Can you dig in a little bit? Can you dig in a little bit about, you just mentioned right there's a lot of different ways. I know that you all bootstrapped, that you actually kept a day job as well while starting out. Can you dig in a little bit there? Because I think the number one, actually behind mentoring, effective mentoring, one of the number one hardships a lot of veterans entrepreneurs face is access to capital. So can you dig in a little bit about how you walked through that with your business?
Like deciding whether or not we wanted to get capital?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So we went back and forth quite a bit. We're actually part of the Vet Tech Accelerator out in California, which is part of the Founders Institute. So very heavily in raising capital and pitching ideas. And Erica and I, which is my other co-founder, spent a lot of time going back and forth. Okay, do we want to go raise money? Do we want to continue to bootstrap? And we went to the IVMF in Phoenix, and we met with a lot of amazing business mentors there. We networked with a lot of the speakers and spent some time. And that's really when they started talking to us more about more traditional type of business funding, like, lines of credit or loans or things from the banks in order to scale and grow versus taking on the capital. So Eric and I we just made lists, the pros and cons of each side. Okay. What are the pros in this? How, we might be able to move faster with capital, but we may not want to move. We may be forced to move in a direction we're not exactly 100% sure we want to move in. And when you take on investors, you also take on other people's plans and ideas. And Erica and I had a specific vision we wanted to keep and maintain for Mad Skills. And so we just felt at the time it was best for us to continue putting money back into the business ourselves. I put in money from my software business in order to help grow it. And she put in, working her job, money to help grow it, until we got to the point where that was no longer needed and we were self-funded and self-making the money. And so now we're at the point where we're going to grow to the next phase. And so then we have to like reevaluate. So I think the conversation's never really over. It's just something that you just continually reevaluate and determine where you're at. And if you have a business partner or if you're just by yourself, you know, you also have to talk to your family. Okay, what are we willing to take on and what level are we wanting to take this business to at this point in time? And that helps you decide.
Great, thanks. John, do you have anything to kind of add about your journey in the business plan competitions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, what I do is farming related, so it's hard not to use that terminology. There's a term called cross-pollination. And if you have an apple tree, there are oftentimes apple trees that are self-pollinating or self-fertile. It doesn't really need another tree next to it to be able to produce apples. But if you put another tree next to it, that's a different type of tree, it'll actually usually double the production. And I think in the entrepreneurial world, the more connections you can have, it's the reason why if you think about like McDonald's on the side of the road, it's typically in a cluster of other restaurants where you have the Wendy's and the Burger King. And there's that notion of like when you surround yourself with people that know more than you do, I often say, you know, I touch the stars because I stand on the shoulders of giants. Or another phrase or saying is wisdom is learning from other people's mistakes. And so those are two things that I strongly recommend, is trying to surround yourself with as many smart people as you can find. When I went through the NatCon in 2014, was it 2014? 2013, I forget, I get my dates mixed up. But the first year I went out there, I was doing a web development company. And when I came home from that event, 3 of the top prize winners of that event used my services. And so those were 3 of my biggest clients and kind of my first big break. And that was super helpful. And one thing that I think is really important to just consistently keep in mind is oftentimes when people talk about like their gross, you know, I feel like there's a tendency to overemphasize like revenues and not really examine expenses in you know, especially earlier on. Just and I'm a penny pincher in general. I think Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, he says every dollar you send out is a soldier, and you send those dollars out, those soldiers, to take prisoners. You know, you really need to look at your expenses and understand your net is really what matters. You know, it doesn't matter if their company makes $1 million. If they spend $1.5 million, they go into debt $500,000 every year. And sometimes I think that's missing. People think that, oh, well, this is, you know, I need to eat. I mean, my wife and I, we really sacrificed to make this vision come through. And fortunately for me, with my web development skills, I was able to make enough money in order for us to transition into this passion, where this is my passion, but obviously running a nonprofit is hard to feed a family, especially earlier on. So I needed to come up with the means to be able to do that.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on capital before I move on? Okay, so I know that, you know, there's a lot of common mistakes that we see out there, and you know, being around entrepreneurs, not only can we learn from the successes, and I also see that there's a question over here on the side, and we'll get to that in a second. Not often, or we can always learn from the successes of other veteran entrepreneurs, but often there's a few common mistakes that we see many just entrepreneurs in general making. To the panel generally, what are some of those common mistakes that you see your friends or, you know, other starters kind of making that you would caution, you know, any VOB against? You know, John, you mentioned one earlier that sometimes people can be a little cavalier in terms of starting, just ready to jump into it and not fully vetting their idea. I know that, Liza, you even said, you know, go out and ask your friends and family, but about your idea. But if, it's not friends or family you want to ask, make sure that you ask someone, what are some other common mistakes or just small pieces of advice you would like someone to sort of avoid as they go into their startup?
I'll jump in on this real quick. I notice when I speak to small veteran-owned businesses that they have a tendency to want to jump in and become rich and famous right away, and they get frustrated a lot by not being able to partner with larger companies or get involved with other companies as far as the procurement side goes. My best advice to them is usually try to find a way to strategize with another company and partner with them to get into these larger companies' supply chains. Maybe work with the primary that's already established, and then you gain your credibility that way when working with these larger companies, and it gives you the opportunity to build your business not as quickly as you might want, but it gets your name out there a little bit better. So.
One thing that I heard with myself, and I've seen it in several other people, is underpricing whatever your product or service is in order to get either clients or revenue or sales, whatever you're trying to get. I was guilty of that. I know a lot of my friends in the law business have been guilty of that. And a lot of people I know doing entrepreneurial stuff who are doing products as opposed to services have been guilty of that. And once you're out there in the market at a certain price, which maybe is too low in order to attract people, it gets really hard to raise that price up to a level that you might need it to be profitable in order for things to work later on.
As I can jump in there too. One thing that, sorry, I took some notes. I kind of maybe slightly disagree with that a little bit. I'm not an entrepreneur myself, but I have entrepreneurs in the family, kind of manage these programs. And talking to a lot of the business leaders, I think there's kind of two pitfalls we see around here. And the first is you do want to have a few early successes, even if they're very small. You need something you can measure and show potentially bigger clients. So a lot of people do get frustrated. They're not getting these huge clients early on, and they're kind of leaving the smaller people by the side because they want some big names to show. But we're finding that if the people that are just getting started focus on a fewer, smaller, measurable jobs, and they can get really good reviews, put those reviews online, be able to show people what they've done on a smaller scale, it's easier to walk in showing what they've already done than what they might be able to do. And like, again, you want to be able to measure that and quantify that in some way that makes sense to people you're trying to sell to. And that also kind of ties into kind of what we find with networking. There's a certain kind of subset of entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs where they really love the idea of networking. So they go to every networking event. They go to every social event. They're buying every book about networking you can find. But they're going out meeting people, but it's not actually adding to their business. It's not actually helping them establish anything. They're meeting a lot of nice people. They're getting a lot of pats in the back. But what does that mean? So as you're going out there, don't just give out your card and take cards, but really follow up, meet people for a coffee. And yes, you want to expose yourself out there, but at the same time, try to develop a few key relationships early on. And sometimes it's probably worthwhile to go a little more in depth and go deeper than wider, in my opinion. That's what we've seen.
See, I agree with both of these guys. I think they're saying something, it's essentially coming from different angles. On the one hand, in terms of when you first enter the market, I think it's important to realize that if you haven't done it before, like, you can't charge what somebody would charge that's a master at the trade, and you're entering into it at a lower level. I mean, you should get paid with what your services are worth, but you should be realistic and recognize you can't charge somebody for some of that on-the-job training that is going to happen when you first launch your business. And so your prices need to reflect that. But at the same time, I think a good place to start with is going after the low-hanging fruit. That's oftentimes, almost the sweet spot. That's the part in which, for me, when I was starting my web development, the $1,000 website range I was making a lot of money. When I went into the $4,000 or $5,000 clients, you know, it was different expectations. And when I was beginning, I think if I had started at that point, I wouldn't have made it very far down the road. In terms of the original question, I think for me, two of the biggest things are, one is, as an entrepreneur, like right now, it seems like we live in the day and age in which entrepreneurship is very glamorized. You know, everybody's watching Gary Vaynerchuk and really excited about doing their own thing, especially veterans. But the reality is not everybody is ready to be an entrepreneur or is born to it. You have to be able to handle pain, like emotional pain, psychological pain, physical pain. Like, it is very difficult to start something. And also you have to be comfortable with failure. Like, no kid starts riding a bicycle down the road and picks it up on the first try. He's going to fall down. And we live in a society in which often looks at us and says, when are you going to get a real job? When are you going to be successful? Until you succeed, it seems as if, you know, it's very easy for people to assume failure is a bad thing. Whereas Edison, I think, is quoted in saying that he found 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. He didn't fail 10,000 times. He just essentially, his failure was with a lowercase f, not a capital F. It's a failure when you stop trying. But if you continue to learn from your mistakes and you continue to, because you're like obsessed on succeeding, and if you're not ready for that, like, to be honest with yourself and recognize that to be a number 2 in a company or number 3, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't, you know, to be the tip of the spear, in one sense, I kind of consider it a curse. I kind of wish I could eat the same oatmeal every day and be comfortable with it. My brain is wired in such a way in which it's authentic for me to go on this path. And I think it's important for people to be realistic with themselves and self-aware as to whether or not they're ready for the challenge.
Thank you. We do have a question over here, and I want to put it out there. And then if we need to give you all some time to think on it while we ask another question, we can do that. Dwayne asks, you know, he's starting a business online. And it's basically, how can you research and build a product that's focused on serving those that need it rather than just spinning your wheels? So I think it's a lot of around, you know, how do you really decide who your target market is and what value you're kind of giving that target market. So I know that here we actually have a lot of, you know, service-based companies. So how did you go about first defining the problem and then creating the value for that problem and marketing that to customers? Do you want to take a second to think about this before?
I can talk about it a little bit if anybody wants to jump in. I think for this area, like, if you know the problem already, most people are trying to solve a problem that they are somewhat familiar with. So they've encountered it in some form, they've seen it, they're not trying to come up with something that's brand new. So if you have seen it and you're trying to solve a problem, so for instance, Mad Skills sees military spouses that need employment, they need virtual jobs because they're moving. I've moved 4 times in the last 5 years. So if I was on a traditional career path and I didn't own a business or have remote work, it'd be very hard for me to grow. So I see that need. Okay, then I see the need of the companies to hire talent and retain talent and to recruit this talent. So there's 2 sides of my story, right? So whenever we did Mad Skills and we created our first MVP that we launched out there, we just got feedback. I mean, feedback. Talk to the people you're trying to serve, because in your mind, you've solved the problem in X way. But in your customers or the people that are actually having the problem, maybe they need it a little differently. So you put something out there and then you get feedback, as much feedback as you can. And then you have to be willing to look at it outside of yourself and say, okay, this is where we need to pivot. I want to do X, but they're telling me they need Y. So this is where we start to move as a business. And so Mad Skills has evolved over by listening to our customers. Like, our virtual staffing piece of our company came directly from hearing our customers say, we love to post a job on the site and hire a spouse, but we would really love it if you just hand them to us and you would do all the HR for us. So that whole part of our business developed strictly from customer development. So spend time there. And you can do that in very simple ways. You don't have to have your entire product design before you do that. You can gather feedback by calling people, talking to them. If I was to create this, would this solve this need? What is your need? Where is your pain point? And design your product to that. Don't spend all your time designing your product before you have really know what the need is you're trying to solve.
Great, thanks, Liza. I think that's actually a really good overview. And I actually, I think one thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, that I hear a lot about is, they go out and they want to start a company and they're so close to their company that they forget what you just said there, that listen to your customers, because there's going to be small pivots that you're going to have to make during this time, because they're the ones really facing these issues. And sometimes, it does come to a point where you do have a business and you are having some success, and you do get some customer feedback about changing certain things, and then there is a decision point that's made is this a departure from what my actual mission of my company is? And that's something to balance as well. But always listen and always be available to pivot as well. Another big thing that someone else want to jump in? Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Just real quick on that point, I think it's important to mention that there's a difference between a mentor and a cheerleader. I think a lot of times people are they think they're looking for mentors, but when they get individuals in their lives that are giving them, feedback and letting them know that whether it's the results speak for themselves or it's the individuals are sharing that with them, it takes humility to recognize that this isn't working. And oftentimes I think people can get so gung-ho that they want this to work, where that's what you have to bring something to, from that startup phase, the initial thing, but you have to have this flexibility, this willingness to listen. And oftentimes there are plenty of people in your life that would be more than happy to really help you and tell you their true opinion and really give you that advice. But you have to be desiring it and not just looking for somebody to pat you on the back. That said, at the same time, I think it's very important to be extremely careful who you seek mentorship and advice from. We live in a world, again, that's very fear-based. There's a lot of people that they're going to be flowing from that place. And I had to learn early on that if I was going to expose myself to certain people and expect them to be able to actually help me, it was foolishness on my part. And so I think it's key to go after mentors, but it's also very important to recognize that you have to be careful who you're seeking advice from. You can't just be putting it out there to anyone, because that negative feedback isn't beneficial if what they're saying isn't actually accurate or good advice, I should say.
So let's build on that for a second. Networking, we've touched on it a couple different times. Networking and sales, really. I think that, with service-based products, a lot of times your network really are who you can get the sales from and how you follow up. And networking with a purpose is something that is very important, especially in the service-based industry. But, we talked about it a little bit earlier that often, anyone, really entrepreneurs, spend so much time going to networking events and talking about themselves that there's a failure in connection there. So, Liza, I've watched you all do this at events. How do you decide what events are good for you? How do you know what connections you want to make in that room? And then how do you follow up with these networks in order to hopefully either create valuable connections or create sales? Because I know a lot of times veterans, or not just veterans, any entrepreneurs say that it's very hard for them to figure out, how do I follow up and either ask for the sale or ask for the connection? So how have you all gone about that in your businesses?
Well, one thing that we do is we're very strategic about what events we go to, like you said, and we have a specific goal in mind before we go to the event. So if I'm going to a networking event, then my goal is going to be to connect with 2 people in a certain area, so that we have specific business goals in mind before we even go to the events. And then while we're there, it's important, I think, when you're networking, to be a better listener than it is to be a better pitcher. So you can pitch yourself and your company, but if you're trying to network with people, listening to them, seeing where they're at, so you can see, okay, am I going to be a value add to them? Can I give them something of value in this exchange so that we build that relationship together. So then after we leave and I reach out and connect, I'm adding value again to them. So instead of going in with the mindset of, how can all these people help me? How can they serve me? If you go in it the opposite way, then you're going to make more authentic connections, and fewer connections that are authentic and can build on are much better than I've met everyone here in the room. So strategically thinking, going after it, and then coming back with more strategy in mind as building this as a relationship and not just as, I just want this person to sign up for my services and now I'm going to move on to the next person. But being authentic in that, I think, is important.
I have a little something to add to that too. This isn't always an easy topic, and I'm saying this as someone who's still in the military, still in the Army National Guard. But sometimes what we kind of see here when we're dealing with, especially some of the higher ranking people that are retired, like the majors and the colonels and above, or the first sergeants and above, sometimes they, when interacting with potential mentors or potential clients or people that are willing to help them, they haven't sometimes made that transition of understanding they're dealing with civilians. So sometimes they, it can come across as someone barking orders at someone or demanding something very quickly, because it happens that way in the military. And sometimes you have to just kind of step back and realize that you are dealing with civilians. There's a different temperament usually that goes along with that, different set of skills. So don't beat yourself up about it, but just kind of keep that in mind, because even here we're giving away free services, free education, and sometimes these colonels or these command sergeant majors will send you an email and within 15 minutes say, I need a reply, and they get kind of tough. And just realize that there has to be a certain flexibility, and just understand that go to these events with an open mind. Understand you're dealing with people with a sometimes different set of life skills, and just kind of work to kind of bring the best part of your military service out. But at the same time, recognize that sometimes a lot of people you're going to be dealing with or selling to don't have those same life experiences. So just keep a certain amount of flexibility, and say please, say thank you, be gracious. Sometimes we get in that military mindset. I'm like that sometimes when I come back from these long drills. That morning I come back, I just answer emails very quickly, answer phone messages quickly. I have to step back and be like, sometimes the please and the thank you and how your kids' basketball game's going go a long way. So just kind of keep that in mind a bit.
Yeah, I do a lot of networking events for my business, and a couple things that I would say about that are, when you're thinking about what networking events to go to, at least for me, because I work in a very specific industry, it's important to think about, are your actual customers going to be at this event? For instance, if you're if you're a real estate attorney like I am, you don't necessarily want to go to a networking event filled with other real estate attorneys. Maybe you do, but those aren't going to be your customers. You want to go to a networking event where your customers are going to be. And then also thinking about, especially if you work with other businesses, who at that customer business is in charge of making the actual buying decisions over whatever it is, service or product that you're selling. Because you could meet 20 people from some company and none of them have the authority to buy what you're selling, and that's not necessarily useful. One other thing, I'm like a naturally introverted person, so networking was very difficult to me. I read this book called Never Eat Alone, which I think probably a lot of people have read and have heard of, but I did find it super helpful for anyone who is looking for tips on that sort of thing.
I think just real quick with that, I want to just put it out there for folks that do have some social anxiety. This is something that is very difficult for me. It's probably the most difficult thing is when I get around a group of people that I don't know and I'm in a room that is just lots going on. I mean, I have to literally go into a corner at time and do deep breathing and try to center myself because it's very, very difficult. And so if you're not good at it, that doesn't mean that you can't get better. And also doesn't necessarily mean that you can't succeed at what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, to some degree, I don't necessarily spend too much time on focusing on the areas that I'm weak on. I do to some extent, but I'm more concentrating on trying to get really great at the things that I am good at, and surround myself with a team of people that can pick up the slack and are great in the areas that I'm not so good at. In the area of networking, it's really, really important. And what I believe to be the most important component to engaging with a potential, the idea of networking is there's multiple different things happening. There's a variety of opportunities in each conversation you have. It can open up a new Pandora's box. There's no telling what can come out of it. The biggest thing I think to keep in mind is everybody in our society and the world we live in is consistently getting bombarded with people wanting something from them. It's the ask. It's always coming in. The Gary Vaynerchuk model, it's the hook. So everybody's throwing hooks constantly, and the jabs are giving. The jabs are what you can give to others. And the idea is that that's distinguishing between noise and a signal. You want to be a signal. You want to be able to, the person walks away and thinks of you as that guy. Actually, I got something from that conversation. And if you can help others, whether at a networking event, you can connect them and help them solve a problem and connect them with somebody that could, that they're looking for. Maybe you can't offer the service, but somebody that can. There's a variety of ways that you can help others, but that's the key. You shouldn't necessarily go into it with the mindset of what am I going to get out of it? You should go into it with the mindset of what can I do to help others?
And if I might add, I think there's one more thing that we've seen running a lot of these programs, introducing veterans and their spouses to the business community or potential clients is, remember, you don't have to look perfect. I think that's the idea. They in the military, a lot of times people don't want to show their weaknesses. They want to show they're always strong. They want to show they're always capable. And obviously you want to be competent and confident in what you're doing. But once you do establish some interaction with someone, it is amazing to kind of see how they're kind of, these seasoned business professionals who can spot marketers a mile away. If you're human and are actually honest about some of your struggles adjusting from the military or being a military spouse, you'll be surprised how even some of the top CEOs of these, multi-million-dollar companies or even billion-dollar companies, you'll see their kind of guard come down. They'll melt a little bit, and all of a sudden it's two human beings dealing with each other instead of a client and a provider. So, I mean, we see this multiple times where someone can say, like a military spouse, or what we're seeing, what actually the women are, female veterans are actually much better at this than our male veterans, not to generalize, but, they'll be honest with some of these investors when we see these interactions. They'll say, I'm very confident about, say, cybersecurity or staffing or whatever business they're going to do. But they're honest and they say, you know what, it was a transition leaving the military. My husband's still in. We have 3 kids. We've moved a dozen times in the past 20 years. There's challenges. We're trying to establish roots for our family. But because of these challenges, we need help sometimes. But at the same time, we have a lot to bring. And then just that human component that you don't have to look perfect all the time. You'll see these highly accomplished CEOs or CFOs. Look at that. The complete expression on their face changes, and they want to help. They want to reach out. So don't be afraid to have that human front and show when you're in need sometimes. I mean, it can be endearing if done in the right way. I mean, you don't want it to be a charity case and complain and say everything that you need, but just be honest with sometimes your struggles. And it is absolutely amazing. This is the one thing we've consistently seen running all of our programs. So I would just kind of encourage people to think in that way.
Yeah, and just real quick, I'm talking too much, but that's been one of the most helpful things for me is when I'm engaging, if I am nervous, for me just to put it out there and say, just want to let you know I'm really nervous, and I know that when I'm fearful, my brain's not working as well as it should, and that typically is enough to get over it. Once you put it on the table, it tends to go away.
That's actually a really interesting point. So I have probably a couple more questions, and then we'll do wrap up. And if there's any points that you all are thinking of that I haven't touched on that you think are very valuable to get out there, we'll have some time at the end for that. So let's talk about a second. I know that we touched on this a little bit, but all of you have have services that at some point or another you've had to set a price for. And we talked about it a little bit at the beginning. John, you pointed out that, you can't go out there as a premium product if you're not actually the premium product, or if you're just starting out. And I know that Justin, you also mentioned a little bit about as price setting. When you were developing your companies and kind of deciding on that price point, how did you vet it? What sort of research do you do to look out there? Because, often, and especially a lot of service-based companies, the prices aren't listed on the website. So it's pretty hard to compare yourself to others in your industry. How did you all go about doing that research to set those prices for your companies, and then, be able to also justify it to your customers?
I can go since I mentioned that initially. I asked a lot of my friends who were in the similar lines of business, kind of what they were charging, and they were, gracious enough to kind of clue me into what a lot of my competitors were kind of ballpark kind of charging for similar things. I mean, if you're going to be in a service business, presumably you've developed some skills in a certain area and hopefully some relationships with people who do, something similar to what you're doing. And so I'd start by asking them, if they're willing to kind of share with you what they're charging and what that looks like.
I would say pricing was one of the hardest things that we did at Mad Skills, because we went back and forth. We talked to mentors. We looked at, because our first model of business pricing was just the monthly subscription to post the job on the site. So we went back and forth with, okay, a low number, a really high number. Okay, what are our competitors doing? Which you could do some research, but what we were doing was a little bit unique. So then we had to weigh in those factors. And I mean, we changed our pricing probably 20 times before we actually put it on the website, because we went back and forth with, well, it would be good if we did it this way, and it'd be good if we did it that way. And, do we want more high quality people paying more? Or do we want to be a lower, cost threshold so that we have more jobs posted? And I think you just have to, do as much research as you can. If you're kind of like us in this sort of unknown space, we sort of took an average of the high and the low, and we're like, okay, let's go with this price point. And then once we put it out there, when we had people that we had never had contact with that came to our site, signed up, paid the fee, posted the job, and hired, then we knew we were in a good spot, because we didn't have to sell to them. Like the service sold itself. They were willing to pay that price. So we were like, okay, I think we're good at this price now. And then we started to build out the other components of the company.
That's great advice. Thank you. So I have one more question before we do our wrap up. We've talked a lot about mentoring and menteeing, and I think that we do a lot through eMentor here that's available to all of our graduates, where they can sign up, create a profile, and get connected to a mentor. And a lot of times we actually hear the feedback that it's very hard to kind of curate a mentoring relationship, whether that's setting expectations on either side of, are you looking for not a cheerleader, but someone to give you real advice? Are you looking for, more transactional in terms of, I just have a couple questions about, accounting, I need to get out of the way so I can move on to my business, or like a life coach? And the onus is kind of on both sides. Mentees have to be able to come to the table prepared with information, also being able to be responsive. How have you all gone about building mentoring relationships? What are some of the mistakes you've made? What are some of the successes you've had? And did you look in your natural network, or did you actually go out and search for someone that met certain qualifications when building out your mentors, whether that's for your business or just generally in life as well? No one has a mentor?
I have one. I'll just say real quick that we went and searched for particular skill sets that we knew we needed, advice and things on. I will say in the beginning, it was really weird for me because I'm a very direct person. So I would just be like, hey, you want to be my mentor? And that typically makes people go, nah, too much work. Like I don't have that much time. So focusing on actually just, getting small pieces of information from a potential mentor and like letting the relationship evolve over time, I think is good, because a lot of mentors are in positions of power. They have a lot of responsibilities. They're very busy. They want to help, but they need you to tell them what you need help with. And they need very specific structures as far as, okay, I would like to meet, once a month to ask these 4 questions. Like, you have to know what you want to get out of the relationship in order for, I think, it to be successful, and to not, just expect one person to just be, Gandhi for your business and they'll tell you everything and know everything. You have to have realistic expectations on their time as well, and then not scare them off immediately by, hey, will you be my mentor, and spend all this time in me, having those specific items and questions you want to ask and value that you can add to them as well.
Yeah, I just want to build on that. You really do have to kind of take the lead and know what you want going into that relationship. The mentors are not there to do the work for you. They're not there to crunch your numbers. They're not there to take over. Like we see that with a lot of our students. Like they see these mentors and they want them to do a lot of the work, and that's not what you need. You need to come in, like what was just said, with specific questions, specific goals. At least in the beginning, like you really need to take the initiative and really respect their time. But once you start doing that, once you're very clear about that and take the lead, and the relationship starts to become more organic, then you'll probably be more, that person will start investing more. But in those early stages, you have to be very clear. And again, don't expect them to do everything. You really need to. And then the other thing too is, again, we see this, like you have to be open to what they say. I mean, the biggest problem I think we see kind of looking from the outside is people sometimes want these mentors to kind of confirm their biases that are already there. But if you're getting presented with new information, really consider that. Don't be so wedded to your idea on how things have to be that you're missing out on the advice of someone who's been doing it for 30 or 40 years. So just, you want to be open. You want to know where you're going, but you want to have some level of openness to that. That's it.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate that point. I mean, that's one of the biggest things from my perspective is if you're going to use somebody's time, and essentially that's what a mentorship is. For me, my mentality is anybody that pours into my life, whether it be the EBV Foundation through the sending me to this expensive program, whether it be somebody that spends an hour with me once a week or twice a month, whatever it is, I'm constantly trying to figure out how to give that person an ROI. Like, how am I going to give them a return on their investment? I'm always trying to prove to them that the time they spent with me was useful. And I think it's very important before you, I believe in diversification. So like identifying subject matter expertise, finding people like one guy that's really good at X, and that's an area that you're struggling with. And then another one, it's different to have somebody that is robust and kind of Renaissance man can help you in a variety of ways. But I think having a team of multiple mentors is really important. But it's important going into it that you know yourself, the idea of integrity and just really not compromising in areas that are non-negotiable to you. Like, you have to have clarity on that, but at the same time you have to recognize, like, if they're a good mentor, they're going to challenge you to do things you don't want to do. That's what makes a good mentor. They're going to challenge you to do things that you don't want to do. And if you are under them as a mentor, you need to do it. That's the hardest thing, I think, is to subject yourself to another person and let them, kind of direct your path. I think there's this strong will nature at times, especially, and I hate to put military guys in or folks in this category, but that gung-ho nature can get in our way sometimes and keep us from really being humble and truly objective. And you can't see what you don't see. You don't know what you don't know. And that's what a mentor is there for. They're people that I call them the gray hairs. They're the guys with the wisdom, the elders that can say to you, you're the captain on the boat, but you need people on the side of the ship with binoculars looking for icebergs for you.
I'd like to say one more thing about that too, is just the last thing with that, just have fun with it too. I know the other thing that can happen with a lot of these mentors is, or these relationships, is you're going there, you want your information, say about marketing or business planning or finance, you get your information, then take off. A lot of these people that are in a position in life where, yes, they're busy, and they might have, a lot of them will be busy and still thinks that, you know, their time is very valuable. But you'll also have another subset that they're at the point in life where they kind of want to share their wisdom a little bit, and some really funny, fun, endearing moments can happen. So I just say at the end of the day, also just be open, enjoy it, and keep a little journal of these like quirky little quotes. And like I have this really fun practice. And Misty knows my recently retired boss Ralph. He's quirky Vietnam era POW. He's like a comedian, one of the funniest guys you'll ever meet. But he's these little bursts of wisdom. So, you know, when you see these older guys, just to be like, what's the secret to life? Just tell me what you're thinking. What do you know at this point that you wish you would have known a while ago? And record it. And they'll be one of the funniest things you'll ever have in your life. They'll be like deep insights about life, perspective. So don't be afraid of that. Like, fun things can happen. So just keep an open mind.
And always have a notebook on you. When folks are talking, you got to take notes, because it's one thing for you to, okay, yeah, but for the most part, like when people say that thing and it registers, write it down and go back to it and consistently try to reflect on, you know, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And sometimes, like when you get into a habit, to break that habit, you have to consistently remind yourself of it.
Thanks, everyone. If there are any other final pieces of advice from the panel before we sign off here, any tips or things that you wish you had known before you had started that you'd share with the veterans now? Okay, and with that, I just want to take a second and, oh, go ahead.
Well, I just say, again, this is coming from the perspective of someone who helps run these courses and not a business owner. But I would say two things on a very practical number about knowing your numbers. Just before you put a huge financial investment out there, I would just say the one thing we're seeing universally is pay that little bit of extra money and hire an accountant for a few hours to go over your numbers before the big investment. Like, know the numbers as best you can. Have an outside set of eyes look at that. That's the practical nuts and bolts advice. The other thing too, I'd say, is really, and this is something we're having to develop more and more here, is really sometimes, again, like I was saying earlier, develop some of the soft skills. A handwritten thank you note can go a long way. Understand that civilian time is very different than military time. And sometimes you have to be comfortable with gray space. You have to be comfortable with sometimes customers or potential business partners not having the same understanding of time that you do. So just kind of cultivate a sense of, cultivate these soft skills a little bit. And that's something where, it's going to be different for everyone, their walk of life, but definitely be very mindful of that.
And I'll just real quick say, one of the key things is don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid of screwing it up. Keep going, learn from your mistakes, and be patient. Recognize that you're in it for the long game. The short term, you're almost going to have a injustice. It's going to be a disservice if you hit the home run on your first swing, because that's not how it works. Like, for every success you have to have that struggle. And the struggle is what takes the lump of coal and makes it a diamond. That pressure is really what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur.
Well, with that, I just want to thank all of our panelists for coming out today and spending some time just kind of giving their tips and tricks for veteran entrepreneurs. As always, if there's anyone that you'd ever want to connect to, not only on this panel, but through the IVMF, please reach out to us, and I'll reach out to Elvis. He's our connection extraordinaire. And with that, I will let Elvis make any closing remarks that you would like to make. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Misty. And thank you, everybody, for watching it. And our next VetNet session will be on November 16th on how to protect your assets. Basically, if you have an LLC, but there's some other things out there that you can do that can hurt your business if you're not aware of it. So stay tuned. Our notification will go out soon. And thanks, everybody on the panel, so much for your time. We appreciate it. And that being said, if anybody has any last remarks, now it's time. If not, then I'll see you next time.
I will say one last thing. Like I said before, this February, all of our alumni will be getting an email about an event that we have coming up in Austin where we're really concentrating on some growth companies. Austin will be hosting an alumni event, 2.5 days. We'll have a procurement event up front, and we're actually going to be deploying over $157,000 worth of capital into veteran-owned businesses that weekend. So it's going to be awesome. We're really excited about all that's going on there, and we have some great names that'll be joining us on the main stage. So please look for information, and we look forward to seeing you in Texas.
Thank you all.